Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Straight Shift, the podcast that cuts through all of the bullshittery that costs you money when it comes to buying, selling, and maintaining cars. Today's bullshittery is brought to you by the leasing companies. Let me tell you a story. I just helped a client who was at the end of their lease on a 2023 Honda CR-V hybrid sport touring. Great little car, super popular, and hello, hybrid. There was just one tiny problem. They were 10,000 miles over their lease allowance. And that's at 25 cents a mile. So let's do some simple math here. That's roughly $2,500 in mileage penalties staring them right in the face. They were prepared to write that check, but I said, no. Let's take a look at this. According to the lease-end letter from Honda Financial, they had three options, and this is typical with leases. They could either lease another Honda. Of course, that's what they want them to do. They could buy out their lease and keep that car, or they could turn it in and pay the overage charges. Notice anything missing there? Nowhere in that letter does it say, hey, by the way, your car might actually be worth more than the buyout amount. You might have positive equity, negative equity. Because that's not what the leasing company wants to do. They want to keep any positive equity for themselves or for their dealers. So here's what we did instead. The buyout was just over $26,000. I shopped it around and got them $30,000 for this car. So instead of chucking out $2,500 in overage charges, they pocketed about $3,500 in positive equity. So that is what I'm going to tell you how to do today. This is going to be an educational podcast on what to do at the end of your lease and how to keep any positive equity for yourself and not for the leasing company. So let's get into it. Let's start out by talking about the biggest leasing myth. Everybody thinks, oh, it's a lease. I don't own the car. I have to either turn it in or buy it out. Yes and no. True, you do not technically own the car. Your name is not on the title, which you will never see anyway. The leasing company's name is on the title. However, you have more control and more options at the end of that lease than the leasing companies and the dealers want you to think you do. Because your name's not on the title, you can't just sell it to whomever you want. You can't sell it privately unless you buy it out first, and you usually can't sell it to just any old dealership. But that doesn't mean you don't have options. Every lease has what's called a residual value, which is usually approximately the same as your buyout amount. This is contracted at the beginning of the lease. It's not something you control. It's not even something the dealers control. This is set by the leasing company, which with new cars is typically the manufacturer's captive finance company. So in this case, Honda Financial. That number's fixed, you cannot negotiate it, and it's what the leasing company estimated that the car would likely be worth at the end of the lease term with however many miles on the car that was agreed upon for the lease. So in this case, it was a 3-year lease with a maximum of 36,000 miles. So that residual value is what the leasing company said, this is about what we think the car is going to be worth at the end of the lease with 36,000 miles on it. So that's what they set as the residual value. But it's just an estimate. It is not, however, the actual market value of the car. They can try to predict that, but they don't have a crystal ball any more than I do. If the market value of the car at the end of your lease happens to be higher than that buyout amount, you have equity. That is positive equity. Regardless of how many miles are on the car, it's however much money someone in the market will pay for that car at that given time. So sometimes you may have positive equity, even if you're over your miles. Sometimes you won't, even if you're at or under the miles. That's just the way market values work. Typically, if you don't have positive equity at the end of your lease, it's because either you're way over the miles and it's not a car that's super hot in the market, or the car was in a wreck during the lease, and even if it was repaired, that's still on the Carfax, and it affects the market value of the car. It could be because the residual was artificially inflated by the leasing company in your contract in order to make that lease more attractive, to get people to lease with lower monthly payments because they were having trouble selling those cars. Or it could just be some random crazy thing that happened in the market and the value of that model just tanked or just didn't hold its value as well as the leasing company thought. Maybe it's just not a popular car. But if the market value is higher than that residual, that equity belongs to you. It does not belong to the leasing company, no matter what they want to think, doesn't belong to the dealer. It belongs to you, even though your name is technically not on the title. So to explain this, we kind of need to back up a little bit and talk about how leasing used to work before the pandemic, the gift that keeps on giving. Previously, when you got to the end of your lease, you could actually trade it in or sell it to any dealer you wanted to. So my clients, they didn't want another Honda. We got them a new Subaru. We would have just been able to trade that leased Honda into the Subaru dealership just like any other trade. Just like if you had a traditional loan on the car, they would have called up the loan company and said, hey, give me a 10-day dealer payoff. Might be slightly different than the actual buyout number for you as a customer, but they used to be really close. And then you just handle it as a normal trade-in. They'd pay off the lease just like paying off a loan. Leasing company would send them the title. That car goes into their inventory. They get to turn around and resell it. What happened during the pandemic was that the insanity of the market with there being so few new cars and the value of the used cars, especially the nice gently used ones, went through the roof. Companies like Carvana and Vroom and even CarMax were paying ridiculous amounts of money for those used cars. I had a lot of clients who sold their used car for more than what we paid for it brand new just a couple years prior. And a lot of people were doing that with their leased cars. So what happened was Carvana and CarMax and all these independent dealers were suddenly sucking up all of that gently used, good quality inventory that normally the franchise dealers relied on, people just blindly turning in their leases, for their certified pre-owned inventory. So all of a sudden, these franchise dealers, they didn't have any new cars to sell, and they didn't have any certified pre-owned inventory to sell because these other companies were literally sucking up all the inventory by paying stupid prices. It was literally like the Hunger Games. Now, granted, that came around to bite some of these companies in the butt, and they overplayed their hand and got in a lot of financial trouble, but they had help. Because what the leasing companies did, and remember, these are the captive finance companies that are owned by the manufacturer, Honda Financial, Toyota Financial. They said, we're not happy about this. We need to protect our dealers. Makes sense. Their dealers are their franchisees. They have a legal obligation to help them, to protect them. And so what they did was, okay, fine. We're just not going to release the titles to anyone except our franchise dealers. So that's how Carvana got stuck with some cars that they could not get the title to. And it just got really, really crazy. And all of a sudden, even though your contract as the person leasing the car didn't change, the leasing companies changed the rules. And they said, you know what? You cannot sell your car to anybody but one of our franchise dealers. And the way they phrased it was you had to turn it in to one of the franchise dealers, but that's not actually true. You could still sell it to any of their franchise dealers. And you know what? Those franchise dealers were paying for those cars as well because they knew they were competing with each other. So you could still shop your car around and hopefully get some positive equity. The dealers also knew, hey, we don't have to compete with Carvana, with CarMax, or even the other franchise dealers down the street for different brands. We're only competing with each other. And that did hurt your competitive advantage. So you weren't able to get as much equity out of it, but those dealers were still competing with each other, especially within a geography where you often have different dealer owners, different dealer groups owning the same franchise. For example, here in Charlotte, we have Hendrick, and they own 3 of the Honda stores in town. but then you've got some other Honda stores. Terry Taylor owns a couple Honda stores. There's a couple other Honda stores. So they are still competing with each other, and that means they're competing with each other for inventory. Fast forward a little bit, we're out of the pandemic. Inventory is still a little wonky, but it's not quite the Hunger Games anymore. But they still want certain off-lease, gently used, well-cared-for vehicles. Anything with the word hybrid in it tends to be one of them. And for Honda, the CR-V hybrid is their best seller. With the affordability crisis and all the nonsense going on with tariffs, and if you're not familiar with what's going on with all of that, be sure to sign up for the Straight Shift newsletter, which is the every 2 weeks newsletter that runs opposite this podcast. It's a companion to it. That's where I get into a little more behind the scenes of what's currently happening in the industry, because it's nuts and it changes every week. I think it changes with every press conference, but I talk about that there. What that means is that the Honda CR-V hybrids, the gently used ones, still totally hot in the market. With Honda Financial, they never changed the rules back, and most of the leasing companies didn't. So we could still only sell this Honda to a Honda store, a Honda franchise dealer. Some of the manufacturers, like Volkswagen, said, oh, you can sell it to whomever you want. Oh, but the dealer buyout price is totally different if it's not one of our dealers. And it was basically a hugely inflated, it was a retail price, which erased all of your equity anyway. Basically the same thing. You had to sell it back to one of their dealers. So here's what you do. And here is what I did. I shopped this car around to all of the Honda dealers, about 6 of them in the greater Chicago area. The hybrids are even hotter up there around major cities. And so I got the Honda dealers into a bidding war with each other. Because I told them, hey, I got a client that has this really nice CR-V hybrid to sell, 46,000 miles, great condition. I sent them all of the information down to the tread depth of each tire, because that's part of my process for my clients' trades. Sent them a boatload of pictures, even sent them copies of the maintenance records so that they know that it was well maintained. And I shopped it to the dealership where they had leased it from, as well as all the other Honda stores in the area, all but one of whom was owned by different dealership groups. So they were desperate for this car. In fact, I'm still getting calls and reminding them, no, sorry, we already sold it. I gave you a window. I told you to give me the best offer, and we got what we wanted and we sold it. Granted, it is still a wholesale price. It's still a trade-in price. If you want to get a retail price from your leased car, then you do need to buy it out. And when you buy it out, you typically have to pay taxes again, because you're essentially buying your own used car. So you're going to pay the taxes, you're going to pay the DMV fees again, which is going to cut into your equity. And then you hope to turn it around and sell it to a private individual. But if you're going to be selling it to a dealer, you have to be realistic and know that it's going to still be a wholesale price. But that's okay, because you're just trying to get out of this car clean. You don't want to pay any overage charges, and you want to be able to keep any equity for yourself. It's just more challenging when the car you want to replace it with is not the same brand. And actually, I think we probably got a better deal shopping it around to the different Honda stores, getting that bidding war going, and not tying it to the purchase of the car that we were getting. Because a lot of people will go in and they want to get another car, just like the one they had. They just want the newer version, or maybe they want to upgrade into a slightly larger one. And they just take in their leased car because the dealers like to say, hey, we'll pay off your lease no matter how much you owe. Over your mileage? Don't worry about it. We got you covered. Well, yes and no. What they do is usually one of two things. If they are very, very ethical and very transparent and very upfront, they will recognize that the value of the car, the market value of the car, if it is truly higher than the buyout, then they will offer you a fair market wholesale price for it that will just erase your negative equity, or what they tell you your negative equity is. Again, don't believe what they tell you. You have to come in armed with those numbers yourself so that you know that you are getting a fair price for that trade vehicle. I don't care if it's leased, it's still a trade in that situation. And so they know that most people are just worried about their mileage overage. And so if the dealer can make that magically vanish, either through equity, or if you don't have positive equity, or they don't care that you have positive equity, they want to make that money for themselves, they will give you that buyout price and just roll the mileage overage charges into the new lease and hope that you don't notice. So this is where it can get tricky. Step one, if you're coming to the end of your lease, you need to know, one, what your buyout is, and that will be on your original leasing paperwork, because remember, that was set at the very beginning of the lease. It's in your contract. They cannot change that. The only thing they can do is charge you for mileage overage at the rate that's in the contract. It's usually anywhere from 20 to 30 cents a mile. And they can charge you excessive wear and tear. That's if the car is more beat up than it should be. And sometimes they have some leeway on that, but they cannot change that buyout. So first of all, know what that is. Then you want to go out and look at, what is my car actually worth in the market today? And there's different ways of doing that. Lots of people will go out to Kelley Blue Book and run it through. Nothing wrong with doing that. I do that too, just to get a benchmark. But remember, Kelley Blue Book doesn't buy cars, so it's just a theoretical number. I run it through places like Carvana and CarMax. That gives me a true market value for someone who would actually pay for that car if they could. Now you have a realistic number, and now you can start shopping around. The dealers are going to want you to bring the car in so they can look at it. And I get that, but you don't want to waste your time driving all over the greater whatever area where you live and physically visiting every dealer. So you want to compile all of the information you have on your car. You want to get the VIN, you want to give them the mileage, you want to, if you have maintenance records, which you should always keep your maintenance records. If you've done your maintenance at the dealership, just call up the service department and ask them to email them to you. They will, usually in a PDF, but you should be keeping your records. And take a bunch of pictures, detailed pictures, like you would see on a used car listing if you were on AutoTrader or Cars.com or whatever. They want to see the details. And be honest, we're not trying to screw over the dealers here. We're trying to be fair. So I take very detailed pictures inside and out. If there are any blemishes, if there are chips in the paint, scratches, certainly if there are any dents or scuffs, get close-up pictures of that and tell the dealers about it. You want to be honest. That's just the way I roll. The more detail you have, even take pictures of the tires so that they can see the tread depth. What I have my clients do, if they don't have an actual tread depth gauge, which the average person doesn't have, take a penny, look at Abe Lincoln. Granted, this is going to be harder because we don't have pennies anymore, but if you have any pennies, take the penny, take Abe and dunk him head down into the tread where the wear bar is, kind of just rest his head on the wear bar of your tire, and then take a picture, because the dealers will be able to tell about what the tread depth is based on how much of old Lincoln's head they can see. Or just get them a good picture that shows the tread on all four tires. Be honest, has the car ever been smoked in? Has it transported pets? I recommend going ahead and really cleaning up the car well before you take these pictures, because the nicer that car looks, the more they're going to offer you, because the less they're going to have to do to recondition it for resale. And plus, they are human. Despite what a lot of people think, car dealers are humans, and they look at a dirty car and go, ugh, just like you would. So clean it up as if you were selling it to a private individual, and then send all those pictures to the dealer. They're still going to want you to come in to finalize the price, but be firm with them and say, hey, I am shopping my car around to all of the dealers in the area. And so you're competing with every other Honda store or Toyota store, whatever your car is. And I don't have time to drive it around to every one of them. So I am gathering all of my initial quotes online. Here are all the documents on the car. Give me your best number. And obviously, if you offer me the best amount of money and we agree to do this, you can inspect the car physically once I get there. And if there are any surprises, then we can talk the numbers again. But I am being very transparent with you about the condition of this car. And again, if you find something upon inspection that I don't know about, that I didn't disclose, then we'll talk again. I've never had that actually happen because I'm very, very thorough with assessing the condition of the car, and I am very honest and transparent with my dealers. And they appreciate that, and they would appreciate it from you too. So this is how you get a bidding war going. Most dealers are not going to give you a firm quote on a buyer's order because they know that you can shop that. But even so, know what the car is truly worth based on your research, based on maybe running it through CarMax's online tool. And then if you get to that number and the dealer's being really easy to work with, you can decide when to stop the bidding war. They're only going to go so high because they still do need to be able to resell it at a profit. But we got up to actually more than what the CarMax number was. CarMax had come back with $29,000, which is kind of right in the middle of where Kelley Blue Book was, and what I estimated it was going to be worth based on my own back-end research. And so I told a dealer, I said, look, you really want this car? He admitted he wanted this car badly. And I said, all right, here's the deal. If you'll go to $30,000, we'll get this done. My client can come in tomorrow and we'll just get it done, cut him back a check for the positive equity, and we'll call it a day. Because at that point I was done shopping it around and we wanted to get it done, and we were coming up on the deadline for the lease. Now, I did not tell them that this was a leased car because it's their own franchise. When they ran the VIN, they would know that. So I wasn't hiding from them, but I wasn't going to hang a lantern on it either. That's up to them to run that, but they would see it when they ran the VIN. So they knew it was a leased car, but they desperately wanted it. And there was no hope that it would get turned back into them. We ended up selling it to the sister store to the Honda store where they originally leased it from because they were the best communicators. They were really transparent with me, and they're like, okay, we'll go to 30 if we can do this tomorrow. And we just came to that agreement, and it was great. My client literally went in. They took 5 or 10 minutes to look under the hood, look over the car, just make sure there wasn't anything that had been missed. And then they had already pulled the payoff amount from the leasing company. And so they had the checks ready to go. Paid off the lease, gave my client a check. Everybody went home happy. And I'm sure that by the time this podcast airs, that car will already be on their lot for resale if it hasn't already sold. So this is how you can get any positive equity out of your lease, even if you're over your miles, and despite what the leasing company will tell you. Now, before we wrap up, I do want to give you just one more secret. Dealers have also found some tricky ways to get around what the captive finance companies are doing. So, for example, if there's a large dealership group, say like Hendrick, they have lots of different franchises. If you are buying, say, like in our situation, a Subaru, but your leased car that you want to get rid of is a Honda, if the Subaru dealership, if they have what I call a sister store, meaning another franchise that is owned by the same dealership group in the area, they have found little ways behind the scenes to still be able to take your leased car in on trade, but then run it through their other franchise to make the leasing company happy. You typically don't get as much positive equity this way, but it can be more convenient and it can still work. So you might ask them if you are buying, say, a Subaru, you might say, hey, do you guys own a Honda store? Or better yet, do that research yourself and just Google and see if there is a Honda dealership under the same group in your area. You can say, hey, I know you've got a sister store. Can we do this deal and you can run it through your Honda store? Some will, some won't. That's just the dealership policy. And if they've figured out how to make it work on the back end so nobody gets in trouble, that is not my business. If they want to do that, that is their decision. I'm cool with it. But that can be a hack to get around that and make your life a little bit easier so you don't have to do the 2 vehicles under 2 transactions. But I still recommend you do that. Even if you are buying the same brand. So let's say my clients did want another Honda CR-V hybrid. They considered it. I talked them into the Subaru because it was a better fit for them. But if they had, I still would have shopped their lease around to all the Honda stores to see who would give the best money. Again, to combat that, oh, this is a leased car, they're trading it in for a new one. We're going to try to keep as much of that money for ourselves as possible. No, 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 no. I always shop the trade separately, but especially when it is leased, because there could be a huge variance. I had a client that had a Volkswagen out in LA, and it was an electric car. And I thought surely the downtown Los Angeles store would put the most money on it, but they didn't. A store about 30 miles away outside of town put $6,000 more on it than the LA store. Because it turns out the LA store was getting all of the lease turn-ins, so they weren't as desperate. This other smaller dealer, totally desperate for this car. And so we netted $6,000. Granted, that was during the pandemic and it was during the rise of electric cars. I don't expect to see that again. But especially if you have a leased hybrid, you probably have positive equity unless that car has been wrecked to within an inch of its life and repaired and is not worth anything anymore. I hope this was helpful for those of you who have leased cars. Leasing is a lifestyle. It is not a good idea to use leasing as a financial strategy to afford a car because there are so many gotchas. But don't fall for the lease-end lie of you have to either turn it in or buy it out. That is not true. You just have to know how to maneuver around the obstacles that the leasing company has placed in your path. There are ways around it if your car is in demand in the market and it's in good shape. Again, folks, I hope this was helpful. There's an entire module dedicated to leasing in my online course, which you can get to at carbinecourse.com. I am going to be revamping that a little bit, and I may split out the leasing into its own separate online course because it really is its own animal. But I do teach all of my secrets in those courses. Well, I hope this was helpful. Until next time, folks, drive safely. I'm out of here.